All right, we'll go ahead and get started as folks start to join us. My name's Courtney Piper. I'm the Executive Director of the Tennessee Advanced Energy Business Council, and welcome to our annual TVA Lunch and Learn, sponsored by Ameresco. We're happy to have you all here with us. For those of you not familiar with the Tennessee Advanced Energy Business Council, our mission is to champion advanced energy as an economic development and job creation strategy. Our definition of advanced energy is technology neutral, so anything that makes energy cleaner, safer, more secure, more efficient is in the tent. We look at energy innovation as a means to economic development and job creation. In the state of Tennessee, more than 394,000 Tennesseans are employed in the sector at more than 20,000 businesses, and it contributes about $46 billion to our state GDP. We have several commitments to our members and stakeholders, and this Lunch and Learn serves one of those. So our commitments to our members and stakeholders are to make Tennessee the #1 state in the Southeast for high quality jobs, inform the national energy agenda, foster the growth of Tennessee advanced energy companies and technologies, and to support TVA and our local power companies as they become energy companies of the future. So with that, we'll get started. I will hand it over to Steve Seifried. He is the president of the Tennessee Advanced Energy Business Council and also the Tennessee account executive for Ameresco, our sponsor. So Steve, go ahead.
Thank you, Courtney, and good morning to everyone. Thanks for joining us. Eliminating carbon dioxide emissions from the production of U.S. electricity is essential in achieving the federal government's goal of net zero carbon emissions. Both the Tennessee Valley Authority and the Department of Energy's Oak Ridge National Lab are already leading the way towards meeting this critical aim. Today, our speakers will tell you about an exciting agreement announced earlier this year. ORNL and TVA have joined forces to advance the critical decarbonization technology effort, all the way from discovery through deployment. These will certainly focus on electricity, but under this MOU, the partners will research how to capture carbon dioxide directly from the air and convert it into valuable products. They'll also explore hydrogen generation, electric vehicle charging, new forms of nuclear reactor technology, long duration energy storage, and of course, grid modernization. On behalf of the board of TAEBC, it's a pleasure to introduce Amy Henry, Director of Transformative Innovation at TVA. Welcome. As well, Andrew Campbell, the Senior Production Manager for TVA's Decarbonization Initiative in the Innovation and Research Division. We want to thank you both for leading this conversation today.
All right, thanks, Steve. Let me get my screen shared here. Can start. All right, you can see that? See the slides? All right, well, it feels like the perfect week to be here talking to you all. TVA just had a birthday. We're 89 years old now, and we're also getting ready to take part in the World's Fair anniversary celebration this weekend, all about energy. And so you may have been seeing some of the historic pictures and things that we've been posting related to those things. But really, we are not dwelling on our past. We are hard at work in building the energy system of the future. So a lot of things are changing around us, around the world. Very much change related to consumer demands for cleaner and more efficient energy. And so TVA knows that our system is going to need to evolve in order to continue delivering in these next coming decades. So what we're doing, we're investing in a state-of-the-art systems operations center. We're installing a fiber communication backbone across the TVA system. We're investing in more efficient generating units all across our system. And all of this is to provide cleaner, more reliable, affordable electricity to the 153 local power companies we work with. And they in turn serve 10 million people and over 700,000 businesses in the 7-state service area that TVA serves. So TVA has set some very ambitious goals for reducing carbon emissions from our own system, and also for helping to decarbonize other sectors of the economy like transportation and industrial processes. So happy to report that we've made significant reductions already. We've reduced our carbon emissions by around 60% compared to what was happening in 2005. And today, almost 60% of the electricity that we generate comes from non-emitting sources like hydro, nuclear, solar. We are on a path to reducing our emissions by 80% by 2035. We're pretty confident that we're on track for that, and we can deliver that without raising prices. And we're aspiring to go even further than that. We want to be net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And that is the really hard part of the challenge. We're going to talk about that a little bit more today. But achieving those goals at the same time maintaining reliability and affordability, that's important for all of the residents and businesses already in the Tennessee Valley area, the ones who want to come here. It's important for the environment, and it's important for stimulating the clean energy economy. Now, last May, TVA's board of directors endorsed the strategic principles and guiding intent document. If you haven't had a chance to look at this document, you can follow that QR code and it'll take you right there. It talks about our track record so far in reducing our carbon emissions, and it talks about what we plan to do. It outlines how we're going to achieve these goals that we've been talking about. And I want to point out one of the principles that's reinforced in that document in particular, and that is that TVA is committed to being a leader in low carbon energy. Now, as Steve mentioned, the pursuit of carbon-free electricity is a national and really a global challenge. Everybody is working on this issue. Trying to get all the way to net zero is going to require us to rely on technologies, to use technologies that really aren't even developed today yet at the scale that we need them. So if you look at this diagram, this is what we project will be needed for TVA to do to meet the demands, the electricity demands in 2050. So one thing to notice here, we expect the demand for electricity to increase. If one of the solutions for decarbonization is electrification, say of vehicles or other sectors, then more electricity is going to be needed. And we want to make sure that that remains as clean as possible. So in order to do that, we will have to call on all of these levers that are available to us. That orange block at the top is a pretty big proportion of the work that we need to do. That is where we need the energy technology innovation. We need to rely on alternative fuels, carbon capture and sequestration, advanced nuclear, all to get us to that net zero goal in 2050. So we, TVA, along with utilities around the globe, are working to find these solutions. I don't know why that keeps advancing. It's our primary focus, and it's also a focus of the US administration. You know, they have set their own goals for net zero carbon emissions and is providing funding through the Investment in Infrastructure and Jobs Act, the IIJA, in order to help achieve those goals. And we agree that that kind of direct financial support and investment by the federal government is needed to accelerate technology development at the pace and scale that we need. So markets and commercial entities are going to be part of that solution, but this investment by the federal government is part of what we need as well. And so TVA is part of the federal government, and we are standing ready to lead development and demonstration of significant carbon reduction technologies. So we've established this portfolio of 6 transformative initiatives that you see. These are areas where TVA is investing in new technology, new business practices, and partnerships in order to build this energy system of the future. And I can't emphasize enough that partnering with others who have the same goals and are dealing with the same challenges is really critical to implementing these initiatives and reaching these goals. So partnership is the reason that we signed that memorandum of agreement with the Oak Ridge National Lab that Steve mentioned at the beginning. We're committed to working together with the lab to advance these technologies that we need to reduce or eliminate carbon emissions. And I think we're so fortunate in this East Tennessee area to have ORNL and TVA both motivated and ready to advance this clean energy technology. You all know Oak Ridge National Lab as the DOE's largest science and energy laboratory. They offer unique expertise, unique research and development capabilities, and TVA, as the largest public power provider in the nation, we're charged with innovating to make life better for those we're serving in the Valley. And we have a very clear commitment for leading in development of this low carbon energy. So together, Oak Ridge National Lab and TVA, we plan to test and scale up technologies, make sure that they're safe, effective, and cost effective before we put them into large scale use in our systems. Now the TAEBC community has seen TVA partner in a number of ways with Oak Ridge National Lab over the years. We've been working together for decades. TAEBC is outstanding in highlighting that work through the media that you share and in that Advanced Energy Economic Impact Report. Oak Ridge and TVA have worked recently together related in development of advanced nuclear technology. We recently put out a announcement about our advanced nuclear program and our partnership with Ontario Power Generation. And about a year ago, we celebrated the first 3D printed component developed for TVA's Browns Ferry nuclear reactor by the Oak Ridge National Lab Manufacturing Lab. So kind of neat stuff. So Steve mentioned it, the MOU outlines many potential ways that we intend to collaborate on all of these 6 transformative areas that we have that we're working on. He talked about the direct air capture work, electric vehicle charging and grid interaction research, small modular reactors and 4th generation nuclear reactors, long duration energy storage, grid resiliency, and security. We're also partnering with the lab on clean tech accelerator programs like TechStars and Innovation Crossroads. And those are designed to foster innovative entrepreneurs and help them grow their clean energy technology businesses right here in our region. Example of that, many of you know Anna Douglas with Sky Nano, one of the first Innovation Crossroads graduates. She's continuing to scale her carbon capture technology, and one day that may be part of the solution for carbon-free electricity. So there's a lot of promising work, a lot of emerging research that we're looking forward to with the lab, and some of the big work that we're doing with them right now is within our decarbonization options initiative. And so I want to turn it over to Andrew now so he can talk about some of the work he's got going and in partnership with the lab and others. Andrew?
Thank you, Amy. Hello, everyone. Andrew Campbell, Tennessee Valley Authority. Apologies if I sound a bit like the teacher from Charlie Brown. I've discovered that the flora and fauna of South Carolina mixed with Tennessee will really do a number on me. As stated earlier, it's the 80 to 100% is what we're focusing on long term, and what we can do to get some of our larger generators and assets ready for that, as well as growth in the future. Amy, if you'll hit the next slide.
Sure.
So we're going to cover today a few options that we have for decarbonization. As it says up there, it's an advanced suite of technologies, but the cost-effective reduction of our footprint to zero is really what we're looking at. And today, we'll talk mostly about carbon capture, sequestration, utilization, that top bullet, and alternative fuels, the second one, which really indicates hydrogen. I think there's a pretty clear place for renewables and storage in our portfolio's future, and those technologies are getting a little closer to advancing into reality as we sit today. Electrification long-term is something we think will both grow electric demand and load growth, as well as help offset things that currently might use natural gas or some other form of carbon. As we replace those, we want to be sure we can do them with carbon-free generations. And of course, advanced nuclear has been in the news lately, and we do have our small modular program at the Clinch River site, as well as other small modular programs across the country that are working on this with us. Next slide. Okay, lots of arrows and stuff on these next couple. So I'm going to go through them as a very high level and pretty quick. But today, if we're making power from natural gas, we use that with air combined in a combustion turbine. We burn it, the turbine spins, it will spin a generator, make power. In the case of combined cycle plants, we'll capture the heat that comes off the back end of that turbine and make steam and make extra power with it. For higher efficiency, but as a result, you get emissions that include air and CO2. So it's all the flue gas that's released. With carbon capture, utilization, and storage in the future, we can do something very similar, but once we've made that power with natural gas, we could then capture the CO2. You can do lots of things with it after that. So industrial utilization, CO2 can be a useful feedstock if you are making chemicals. We'll see that in combination with hydrogen on the next slide, but you could also make natural gas into hydrogen directly through a process called steam methane reformation, in which you could capture the CO2 that would be released when you made that hydrogen and then liquefy and transport that as well. This technology is promising because we do have natural gas combined cycle assets in many locations on our fleet. Those big central generating stations are useful to help balance the grid, to keep the load and voltages of our power system in check and where they need to be. They're dispatchable, so we can call upon them when they're needed. You can also direct air capture CO2. Turns out there's a lot less CO2 in the air than there is in flue gas. So as a result, it's a lot harder to capture. That process we do see long-term as having value to help us balance our net zero aspirations. But it is expensive compared to direct capture right now. So we're evaluating what the best locations and uses for that are. Long-term, after you've caught the CO2, there's a geological sequestration model that appears to be the most useful. Industrial utilization can only take so much product before you're making things that we don't really need anymore. So the underground mineralization, something the Department of Energy's got pretty good reports on. There's a lot of promise there, especially depending on where in the country you are. It's geologically dependent, however you want to say that. But it's a very promising method to deal with CO2 that has been captured from these processes. Next slide. And this is hydrogen. which you can just tell by the number of icons is way more complicated. Really, the two primary things to note here is you've got electrolysis, which is the top thing there, fed by wind, solar, hydro, nuclear, whatever it is. As long as it's a carbon-free source of generation, you get very low carbon intensity hydrogen. You can't make it with power that's made by natural gas or coal plants, or you've got a increased carbon intensity. Electrolysis is just what it kind of sounds like. You use electricity and an electrolyzer process to make hydrogen out of a water. You kind of split H2O into H2 and O. So you get two pretty useful industrial gases from the process, and it consumes electricity. Up top, you will see advanced nuclear and thermochemical. It's really a high heat process that's pretty far out. Works similar to an electrolysis kind of thing, but with the thermal energy input required. It is under research now. Biomass plastic gasification, natural gas. We talked about the steam methane reforming on the prior slide, and that icon called pyrolysis is bench scale research right now. You use natural gas and get a solid carbon instead of a gaseous carbon that you then have to capture. But it's very far from being a commercial level product. But with all those, they come together, and once you've made hydrogen into the storage and transport medium, and then you can do all kinds of interesting things with it. Burning hydrogen directly, just like it was natural gas, is probably not the best use. There's lots of other areas, really the energy sectors that could be decarbonized and make a lot more sense before you get to the electric power portion of consuming hydrogen. Fuel cell vehicles. We all know battery electrics work well right now for passenger cars, but once you get up into heavy class trucks like the 7, 8, semi scale trucks, they need a lot of oomph to move around a lot of freight, and every bit of battery that you've got on that truck is cargo that you could be using. So there might be advantages in heavy trucking. Rail transport could be repowered from diesel to electric via hydrogen fuel cells. Shipping in large container vessels is a good possibility. A lot of transportation sector things can be fueled by hydrogen somewhat effectively, is the hope for the future. There's still work to be done on all the hydrogen technology here. Sustainable aviation airline fuel, they call it SAF, upper right hand corner. Synthetic natural gases and methanols are all options for chemical uses of hydrogen to make fuels that are effectively carbon neutral when combined with other things like CO2 capture from the air, or a biomass kind of process to make these fuels that are liquid that we can move around. Very bottom, I kind of got by it, was a Haber-Bosch process. That's one of the ways that we make ammonia today. You've got a natural gas and hydrogen input. So natural gas turns into hydrogen. You then combine that with nitrogen from the air and make ammonia, which is used a lot of times for fertilizer for crops in the agricultural industry, as well as a catalyst for different reactions and industrial processes. That is another option with a green or blue hydrogen or a pink hydrogen for the nuclear version. Any of the carbon neutral things to get rid of a good direct carbon that makes it to the environment now. Looking here, I think I've covered the most of it. I just want to get those high level processes for what we might use decarbonization hydrogen for out there before we take questions. Amy, I think we've got a question slide right after this.
Sorry, I was finding buttons here. Well, there we go.
Now it's questions.
Well, and I think Just to layer on all of that you walked us through, you said it was complicated. It is complicated, and it just points out the need for so many partners in this development. It's important to create an entire economy around hydrogen and even carbon. We don't have that today. So we got to be able to capture it in the case of carbon or generate it in the case of hydrogen. That's done at certain scales, but then you've got to do something with it. Otherwise it just gets re-released into the atmosphere. So what we're working toward here is developing an entire cyclical economy for both of these areas. And, TVA providing energy and potentially a place to burn hydrogen, TVA capturing its carbon. That's our role. We want to work with Oak Ridge National Lab on researching the technologies that will help us do this effectively and in an economical way. I think Andrew mentioned, a lot of this stuff is possible today, but it's incredibly expensive, and it actually uses more energy or emits more carbon than it saves. So we've got to figure all of that out. We are also partnering with industry in all those areas that Andrew pointed out in the diagram, trying to figure out how can we connect as partners with those potential users so that this does become a cycle or an ecosystem. It's got to be a closed loop in order to work the way that it is intended. So a lot of work to be done, but we're moving forward and focused on that, and just working on it day to day. So I think
Great.
we're ready for questions.
All right. Well, Amy and Andrew, this is very exciting. We have a lot of questions. Before I get to them, just want to remind folks to use that Q&A function to ask a question, and we will start that process now. One of the first questions that we got when the presentation started was, will these slides be available and distributed after the presentation? And the answer to that question is yes. So you can check out our website. I'm sure we'll be sending a follow-up email to everybody who RSVP'd, and these slides will be available to you after the program today. First question that we got was from Ian. He says, I often tell colleagues in other parts of the country that TVA was an original leader in storage via Raccoon Mountain. Looking forward, can you share more about your plans for next generation storage?
Yeah, well, thank you for that recognition. We're pretty proud of Raccoon Mountain as well, and it really is a key part of our system in storing that energy when costs are low, generating energy when we really need that extra source. And so Raccoon Mountain is really the crown jewel of long duration storage. Right now, in fact, in a couple of weeks, we're getting ready to break ground on our first utility scale storage project that is lithium-ion batteries. That'll be a project that we're doing near Von Orr, Tennessee, and it will be a 20 megawatt battery system. It will be able to discharge energy for 2 to 4 hours. So that's a good start, but it's really short duration, much shorter than our system needs. And as we're adding the quantities of solar generation that we're adding, we are projecting adding up to 10,000 megawatts of solar in the next decade. Because that's an intermittent source, we've got to have the storage to help balance that energy on the system. So in addition to more short duration storage like the Von Orr lithium-ion battery, where we are exploring several different possibilities for long duration storage. And long duration would be in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 hours of discharge. So we are looking at chemical flow batteries. that would be large tanks of ions that would generate a charge for long duration. We're looking at a method of gravity storage that's really just mechanical energy, lifting blocks up and down to charge and discharge. And we're also looking at the possibility of additional pump storage. So all of that's in play, and we're looking at what the best options for the system would be.
And Amy, on that topic of long-term dispatchable storage, I think I got the order of those words correct. Maybe I need another cup of coffee today. Can you talk? I noticed on some of Andrew's slides too, it looks like you all are perhaps exploring power to gas. So the process of using curtailed wind, solar, nuclear generation to create hydrogen or synthetic methane that could then be stored and dispatched when you need it on a longer term basis. So kind of a two-part question. Can you talk about the role of long-term dispatchable storage as you move to decarbonization? And, specifically, just a little bit more on some of those power to gas options that you all may or may not be considering. I couldn't remember what colors they were in that chart.
Yeah, and maybe Andrew can talk a little bit about the color scheme too. I'll take the first part and toss it over to Andrew for additional input. The long duration storage, again, is really important for maintaining the reliability and the flexibility of the transmission grid as we add those intermittent solar sources. So right now we've got the generation needs to be used within about 15 minutes of when the load is when the demand happens. And so our systems operations center staff is really good at predicting and arranging the generation, calling up the generation and dispatching it at just the right time. But it becomes a lot more complicated when you have increasing amounts of solar on the system that only generate when the sun is shining. So that long duration storage is a way to capture that electricity generated by solar or other sources, storing it for as long as we need, and then being able to discharge it in peak times or in times when the system needs that extra reliability, the frequency regulation. So that's why that's so important to us. Andrew, you want to pick up on how some of your systems could act as storage for energy?
Yeah, Amy, and back to that dispatch philosophy, that's one of the really hard things to balance. Electrolyzer installations that can turn electricity into hydrogen can do that. The periods of time in which you expect to have excess generation, though, have to be matched to how big those systems are. And when you deploy systems like that, the best way to get the most value out of them is 24/7 type of operations. They're production facilities. And really, when we see those low, zero, or negative power prices in other markets that do the real-time things like Texas, that's only so many hours per day that those exist. And that's balancing that versus the cost of these electrolyzer systems is one of the really hard things to keep balanced as far as looking at when it makes sense for the curtailed power to be turned into something else and stored long term rather than used right then. So that's a balancing act. Really long term, yeah, hydrogen can be a strong grid resiliency play. Transmitting and shifting load across time and using fuel cells is something that works. The question is, when does it make the most sense, and at what point of saturation does it really help us? I mean, in a utopian future 20 and 30 years away, who knows how we might be able to dispatch the fleet. Hopefully we can have a little more width in the time frame we're looking at, from real-time loads that we must balance today with what we've got to longer term, more stored energy. But it has to be cost effective, not just technologically possible.
Okay, great. And that's a great lead in, Andrew, to our next question. With all these emission goals, they are very ambitious. Also, these are emerging technologies that are not completely proven yet. Would love to learn more about what the biggest challenges are for TVA.
Well, you've got it there on the emerging technologies not proven yet. Everything I talked about works at some scale. Otherwise, we wouldn't be following it that deeply yet. But it does not work at an industrial power utility type of scale yet. And that's really what we're monitoring and watching when we say innovation and research is how many of these technologies will scale up and achieve the promise that they look like they've got today. And how effective will we be able to deploy those as a utility or really just a future version of power generation. Carbon capture, for example, it works. It's worked for a number of years at lower efficiencies. Submarines have used amines to scrub oxygen for years of CO2 emitted from people breathing. When you step it up to a power plant and there's 1,000 megawatts of flue gas, it becomes a much more difficult to operate and maintain just because of the flows and the volumes. And can we effectively manage that? And when I say we, I mean an industry we. There's a lot of people looking at this right now, and we're partnering with places like the National Carbon Capture Center and EPRI's Low Carbon Resource Initiative to monitor and understand those so that we're not doing it alone. We're doing it with peers and partners in industry that will help all of us understand how we can deploy this and if we can deploy this in the near-term window.
Okay, our next question is about the value of carbon. Does TVA provide any tools to help determine the value of carbon for a company?
I can take that one. So we do have a calculator, a way to help a company, an industry that's within the valley, calculate its carbon footprint, if you want to say it that way. The value of it depends on some other factors that that would relate to the company, but we can certainly help them with that conversation by helping them understand, first of all, what they get from receiving power from TVA. So what is the carbon content, if you want to put it that way, of the energy that they buy from TVA or from their local power company, and then help them calculate some of the other sources and ways that they might be emitting carbon from their own industry. So we do help companies with that.
Okay, great. Our next question is about fuel cell projects. Can you speak more about the fuel cell projects that you are finding? I'm developing more durable PEM fuel cells with FC Renew at ORNL with Innovation Crossroads. So can you speak more about the fuel cell projects that you are funding, maybe finding or funding? Maybe there's a typo.
I'll take that. So as I'm aware, we're not currently funding any. We keep monitoring the technology for advancements. Right now, they are good, especially when you look at backup power. Most of them are natural gas fed, like the Bloom box for what we see today. For the direct hydrogen feed fuel cells, we do see a good resiliency play in the future. As their cost comes down, we can install reasonable quantities, but they're more business centric. Local load backup power is where they make a whole lot of sense right now. And we hope that they can kind of expand their footprint to what would help a utility scale power need.
All right. Our next question is about skills needed. What are the specific technology? What is the specific? Let me start this over again. What are the specific technology expertise you need from potential partners in the next year and over the next 2 to 3 years?
I'm going to start that one, and you can throw your 2 cents in, Andrew. Workforce development is something that TVA is focused on. That is a big part of developing the energy system of the future, because as the system evolves, the skills needed to maintain it, operate it, continue developing it are also going to evolve. And I think at a high level, what we're seeing are, you know, the understanding of how these new technologies work, the energy storage technologies, the inverter-based resources that are on our modernized grid, how fiber works and enables all of that system, as well as data and data analytics is underlying everything now. Monitoring the health of our systems, the performance of our systems, monitoring the grid to minimize outages, understanding how all that fits together are some of the skills that our next generation of employees are going to need to have. And I would say being able to relate to partners and develop these business relationships is key as well. I mean, we are moving quickly away from the day when we could do our work. We always talk about silos in our own company. We cannot work in silos in our own company, and we cannot work in a silo as a company. We've got to partner with others. So having the business acumen about what's going on in the industry, what's going on around the globe, all of that is important. And so I see, Steve asked, what do you need from potential partners? That's really the ability to, understand the common vision that we're all trying to, these goals that we're trying to achieve, and be creative in thinking about ways that we could apply these technologies and tackle those complicated challenges that Andrew's been talking about, so that we can make the solution safe and cost effective for the entire system. So Andrew, I don't know if you've got something to add to that.
Very little. You hit most of the areas that we'd really be concerned about. It's just flexibility in thinking, both directions. It's what we can deliver as energy. It's for years and years. It's been we push energy out and it's consumed on the other end. There's a dynamic system in place that things don't all work like they used to, and we need to understand that as we evaluate things. And solutions can be all over the place now, and thinking about each one individually and independently is really important.
Yeah. One thing I really enjoy as we work with partners is just the ability to think about ways to apply technology or business practices in a new way. There's a solution from some other industry that we can take and adapt to what we need. How can we do things like Amazon does? How can we do things like Volkswagen does? All of our partners can help us learn new ways to do things better.
Great. Next question is about nuclear reactors. Exactly what does TVA envision as a time frame for any of the new proposed reactors to be potentially producing energy?
Well, that's a good question. We right now our main focus on that is the small modular reactor work that we're continuing at the Clinch River site near Oak Ridge, working with the lab and Ontario Power Generation and others to try to advance that design. And the next big hurdle is licensing. So we're moving on into that space. I think the recent announcements talked about the 2030s as the earliest time that we would project that being operated. Of course, there's a lot of challenges to solve as we get there, but we think that there is value in addressing each of those challenges as we go forward. We learn more. We may have to pivot based on what we learn, but we're continuing in that direction, and we think it's looking promising so far.
Great. Let's see, our next question is, can you elaborate on deployable technologies today? What other solutions are being explored?
And I think I see that question is specifically asking about carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration. So Andrew, you want to take that one?
Yeah, you're the main carbon capture ways we've got right now. There's a sorbent material, a solvent material, and a membrane type material. We're seeing, for at least power generation, solvents are the most reasonable version of the current technology. Those are going to be amine based solvents, and there's a lot of hope that those are going to be our most effective way. Biggest hurdles with each one is the total energy consumption. It takes a lot of energy to capture and then release CO2 from these solvents before you store it, but they are the most viable developing technology right now. We still have to see them operate well at scale. Does that answer the question?
I think so. Another question, if you were dreaming, which of the many challenges would you most like to see solved?
I'm just going to say effective storage. No matter what you do, storage is going to be limited by physics, right? Like you're going to lose energy when you move it around and store it, and kind of shuffle the energy to a different time, which if we can get one that the losses aren't too bad and can be deployed without really good geology like pump storage or really good like topography. I mean, that is an absolute game changer for how we could then tackle a lot of other issues around real-time delivery of reliable power.
Okay, great answer. All right, we've got one more question here, and this will be our final call for Q&A. So if you do have a question, just use that Q&A function and we will ask it. Another question, is it conceivable that TVA might share its technology scanning with partners who may not have the resources to do their own useful depth? Their own to a useful depth.
I think so. I'm reading that as would we share our learnings? Would we share what we've learned about technology with others? I'm going to answer it that way unless the person wants to clarify. So yes, I think Andrew mentioned a couple of areas where we are in research consortia, collaboration groups, EPRI's, Low Carbon Resources Institute, National Carbon Capture Center. We are active in conferences and other areas, including this one here. And, you know, when we have developed information that's helpful to us, we share it when we can. Again, this is a global, national challenge that quite a lot of different industries are focused on. And if we can share what we've learned about what technologies can work for us and what don't work for us, then I think, you know, that's an opportunity for all of us to learn and advance together. We'll add to that just with a little thought on our recent collaboration and support with these technology accelerators. These entrepreneurs that are really bold in getting out there with their new ideas in Innovation Crossroads or Techstars, or we have a couple of others that we support. You know, these are early stage technologies in many cases. Just they're just working in the lab, or they're early in their maturity, but it's still valuable for us to work with those entrepreneurs, even if we're not, you know, getting ready to buy one of their products in the next year or so, if they're not quite there yet. But we learn a lot from them, and we hope that they can take from us, you know, what practical applications, what are the priorities for TVA, what makes a safe and effective solution. And that co-development, that sharing of knowledge with those entrepreneurs has been really valuable for us. We look forward to continuing that.
And Amy, let me underscore that too, because TVA is a valuable partner to 3 of the energy themed or energy focused accelerator and incubator programs that we have in East Tennessee. So Innovation Crossroads at Oak Ridge National Lab, Techstars Industry of the Future, and the new Spark Clean Tech Accelerator that will be, first cohort will be here in June.
Mm-hmm.
And to the extent that TVA does that information sharing and that customer discovery is an extraordinarily valuable exercise for our entrepreneurs, and I think further underscores our region as a leader in decarbonization. So that is just an extraordinarily valuable thing that you all do for our community and also for entrepreneurs.
Thank you. We got a lot out of it too.
We have one more question, and that is TVA looking at thermal energy storage using synthetic phase change materials?
Andrew, can you address that one?
Yeah, we've seen a couple. They've got great promise, but they need more development to really prove out. One of those things where, yeah, we're interested, but we need to see a little more upscaling before we get to more deep evaluation and deployment kind of work. Heat balances seem to work from what we've seen so far. So the physics are there and the losses are pretty close to acceptable.
Okay.
I would like to point out on that last question, I saw somebody pop into the chat about entrepreneurs understanding. Please check out the Department of Energy's different directorates. They have some great reports and annual breakdowns on the work they're doing and where they think the energy future of the U.S. is going. They're quite detailed and in-depth and sometimes hard to find, but just poke around the Department of Energy websites.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. I just put in a link to the Tennessee Advanced Energy Economic Impact Report in our chat. That report was supported through generous contributions from TVA and also the University of Tennessee. That is something that we produce every 3 years to evaluate the scope and scale of our advanced energy economy. So I've got that resource in the chat there for everyone. All right, Andrew and Amy, thank you very much for joining us for this annual TVA Lunch and Learn. It's been incredibly informative, and we always appreciate you guys taking time to talk with our members and stakeholders. And of course, a big thank you to our sponsor, Amoresco. If you all like what you hear and you want to learn more and you are not yet a member of the Tennessee Advanced Energy Business Council, we invite you to join. tnadvancedenergy.com, you can find more information there. And we, again, thank you all for joining us and have a great weekend.
Thanks, Courtney. Thanks, everyone.